He didn't even help me up after the steel-toed boot connected with my ankle and sent me crashing to the concrete garage floor, after the sound of bone cracking echoed through our house in Maplewood Heights like a gunshot, after I lay there screaming in agony while he stood over me with that satisfied smirk that meant he'd finally found a way to hurt me that would leave lasting damage. I called for my mother Rebecca through tears of pain and betrayal, and when she found me writhing on the cold concrete with my foot twisted at an unnatural angle, she looked at her precious stepson Derek and said the words that would haunt me forever. "Accidents happen, Natasha. You need to forgive your brother and move on." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Natasha Chen-Williams, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been told to forgive someone for deliberately breaking your bones just to keep the family peace? The attack happened on a Saturday afternoon in late October, when the autumn leaves were just starting to turn in our quiet neighborhood of Maplewood Heights. I was 16 years old, a junior at Riverside High School, and I was in the garage organizing my college application materials when Derek cornered me there. Derek was 19, my stepbrother for the past 4 years since Mom married his father William. He was supposed to be the protective older brother figure, but from the day our parents got married, Derek had made it clear that he saw me as an unwelcome intruder in his family dynamic. "Still working on those college applications?" he said, leaning against the garage door with his arms crossed. "You know you're not actually going to get into any of those schools, right?" I was sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, surrounded by transcripts, recommendation letters, and essay drafts. I'd been working for months on applications to Princeton, Yale, and Harvard, universities that my academic achievements and volunteer work had made realistic possibilities. "I'm doing fine with my applications, thanks," I said without looking up from the essay I was editing. "Natasha, you're delusional if you think any Ivy League school is going to accept some mixed-race girl from suburban Connecticut." I kept writing, trying to ignore the racial undertones in his comment. This wasn't the first time Derek had made remarks about my heritage. My father was Chinese-American, my mother was white, but I'd learned that engaging with his provocations only made things worse. "Did you hear me?" Derek stepped closer, his shadow falling across my papers. "I heard you. I'm just not interested in your opinion about my future." "Your opinion? Natasha, I'm trying to save you from embarrassment. You think being valedictorian at some suburban high school makes you special? You think your little volunteer work at the animal shelter is going to impress college admissions officers?" I finally looked up at him. Derek was tall and muscular from years of high school football and weight training. He towered over me even when I was standing, and with me sitting on the floor, he seemed enormous. "Derek, I have a 4.0 GPA. I'm president of 3 clubs, I volunteered 20 hours a week, and I scored 1580 on my SATs. My credentials speak for themselves." "Your credentials," he repeated with a laugh. "You want to know what your real credentials are? You're the stepdaughter who showed up and made everyone else look bad. You're the reason my dad stopped paying attention to my achievements." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time anyone in this family celebrated anything I accomplished? When was the last time anyone asked about my goals or my future?" I stared at him, confused by the sudden shift in his tone. "Derek, you graduated high school with a 2.8 GPA, and you're taking community college classes part-time while working at a warehouse. What achievements are we supposed to celebrate?" The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Derek's face darkened, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "So you think you're better than me?" "I didn't say that. You just said my grades and my job aren't worth celebrating. I said that you can't blame me for people not celebrating achievements that don't exist." "Achievements that don't exist?" Derek's voice was getting louder. "I work 40 hours a week to help pay bills, while you sit around writing essays about your feelings. I work 25 hours a week at the bookstore, on top of school and volunteer work." "Oh, the bookstore," Derek said mockingly. "How impressive. Shelving books for minimum wage." "At least I'm saving money for college instead of spending everything on video games and energy drinks." That's when Derek's expression changed completely. The fake concern was gone, replaced with pure rage. You know what, Natasha? I'm tired of you walking around this house like you're better than everyone else. I'm tired of watching my father fawn over your perfect grades while he barely acknowledges that I exist. I'm tired of listening to your mother brag about your college applications while she acts like my future doesn't matter. Derek, that's not my fault, isn't it? You think you can just show up in our family and take over? You think you can make the rest of us look like failures by comparison? I started gathering my papers, sensing that this conversation was heading somewhere dangerous. I'm going inside. No, you're not. Derek stepped closer, blocking my path to the door. We're going to settle this right now. Settle what? Derek, I've never done anything to you. You've done everything to me. You've made me invisible in my own family. That's not true. And even if it were, it's not something to settle. It's something to work on with your parents. My parents don't care about working on anything. They're too busy being impressed by your perfect performance. I stood up, clutching my college materials to my chest. Derek, I'm going inside. If you want to talk about family dynamics, we can do it when Mom and William get home. No, we're going to talk about it now. He moved closer, and I could smell the energy drink on his breath mixed with something else, something that made me think he'd been drinking beer in the garage before I came out here. Derek, have you been drinking? That's none of your business. It is if you're drunk and trying to start a fight with me. I'm not trying to start a fight, Natasha. I'm trying to have a conversation about your attitude problem. I don't have an attitude problem. You have a problem with me succeeding. There it is, Derek said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you're succeeding. You think you're special. I think I'm working hard and it's paying off. You think you're better than me. Derek, I think we're different people with different goals and different approaches to achieving them. Different approaches, he repeated. You mean you try hard and I don't? I mean you blame other people for your problems instead of working to solve them. That's when Derek snapped. You want to see a problem, Natasha? I'll show you a fucking problem. He lunged forward and grabbed the college application materials out of my hands, scattering papers across the garage floor. Derek, stop! Those took me weeks to organize. Oh no, he said in a mock sympathetic voice. The princess's perfect paperwork got messed up. I dropped to my knees and started frantically gathering the scattered documents. Some of them had landed in a puddle of motor oil, and I could see ink bleeding across pages of carefully crafted essays. You're insane, I said, trying to save what I could. These are my college applications. Do you have any idea how much work went into these? I don't care how much work went into them. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to have something important destroyed. I looked up at him from the floor, clutching oil-stained papers. Derek, what is wrong with you? Why would you do this? Because I'm tired of watching you succeed while I fail. I'm tired of being the disappointment in a family that worships the ground you walk on. So you decided to sabotage my future? I decided to show you that you're not untouchable. I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. Derek, you need help. This isn't normal behavior. Normal behavior? You want to talk about normal behavior? Normal behavior would be acknowledging that your success comes at other people's expense. How does my success come at your expense? Because every time you achieve something, it highlights what I haven't achieved. Every time our parents praise you, it's a reminder that I'm not good enough. That's not my responsibility to manage. Isn't it? We're family, Natasha. Family members are supposed to consider how their actions affect each other. I stared at him in disbelief. So, you think I should deliberately perform worse academically so you feel better about yourself?
I think you should stop acting like you're God's gift to academic achievement. I think you should stop blaming me for your own lack of effort." Derek's face went red. "Lack of effort? You think I don't try? I think you spend more energy complaining about unfairness than you do working to improve your situation. And I think you spend more energy showing off than you do considering other people's feelings. Derek, getting good grades isn't showing off. It's doing what's expected of students." Expected by who? By parents who set impossible standards? Expected by colleges that I want to attend and scholarships I need to afford them. Right, because you're so much smarter than everyone else. I'm not smarter than everyone else. I work harder than most people. There it is again. You work harder. You're more dedicated. You're more deserving. Derek, those aren't character flaws. They are when you use them to make other people feel inferior. I've never made you feel inferior. You make yourself feel inferior by comparing your worst efforts to my best results. That's when Derek lost it completely. My worst efforts? You think everything I do is my worst effort? I think you have more potential than you're using. And I think you have more ego than you deserve. He stepped forward aggressively, and I backed up until I hit the workbench. Derek, you're scaring me. Good. Maybe now you'll understand how it feels to be intimidated. I've never intimidated you. Everything about you intimidates me, Natasha. Your grades, your accomplishments, your confidence, your fucking perfect future plans. Those things shouldn't intimidate you. They should inspire you. Inspire me? You want to know what would inspire me? What? Watching you fail for once, watching you struggle, watching you not get everything you want just because you think you deserve it. The hatred in his voice was so pure, so venomous, that I finally understood this wasn't about college applications or family dynamics. This was about Derek's fundamental resentment of my existence. Derek, I'm going inside. No, you're not. He stepped sideways, completely blocking my mouth to the door. Derek, move. Make me. I tried to push past him, but he grabbed my arm and shoved me backwards. I stumbled but caught myself against the workbench. Don't touch me, I said, my voice shaking. Or what? You'll tell Mommy and Daddy? I'll tell them you're drunk and being aggressive. And they'll make excuses for me, like they always do. What's that supposed to mean? Derek smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I'd ever seen. It means nobody in this family wants to deal with the reality of who I am, Natasha. They'd rather pretend I'm just going through a phase than admit that I might actually be dangerous. Dangerous? You want to know why I really hate you? It's not because you're successful. It's because you're naive enough to think that success protects you from people like me. People like you? People who have nothing left to lose. That's when I realized Derek wasn't just angry or drunk. He was planning something. Derek, whatever you're thinking about doing, don't.
Don't what? Don't hurt me. Hurt you? Derek laughed. Natasha, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to teach you a lesson. What kind of lesson? The kind that leaves a permanent reminder. He reached behind the workbench and picked up a heavy metal tool. I couldn't tell what it was in the dim garage lighting, but it looked like a hammer or wrench. Derek, put that down. Why? Are you scared? I'm concerned that you're about to do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. I tried to run then, tried to push past him and get to the door, but Derek was faster and stronger. He grabbed me by the shoulder and spun me around, and I lost my balance and fell hard onto the concrete floor. I landed on my hands and knees, and before I could get up, Derek was standing over me. You know what your problem is, Natasha?
You think intelligence makes you invincible. You think good grades protect you from the real world. Derek, please. The real world doesn't care about your GPA. The real world doesn't care about your college applications. The real world is full of people who will hurt you just because they can. I tried to crawl toward the door, but Derek stepped in front of me. Where are you going? We're not finished with your education yet. That's when I saw him lift his foot, the heavy work boot he always wore, steel-toed and designed for construction work. I saw him aim it at my ankle, saw the calculation in his eyes as he chose exactly where to strike. Derek, no! The boot came down with all his weight behind it, connecting with my left ankle with a sound I'll never forget. The crack of bone breaking, the immediate explosion of pain that shot up my leg and through my entire body. I screamed, not just from pain, but from the shock of realizing that my stepbrother had just deliberately broken my foot. Tarek said, breathing heavily as he looked down at me, writhing on the concrete floor. You know what your problem is, Natasha? You think intelligence makes you invincible. You think good grades protect you from the real world. Tarek, please. The real world doesn't care about your GPA. The real world doesn't care about your college applications. The real world is full of people who will hurt you just because they can. I tried to crawl toward the door, but Derek stepped in front of me. Where are you going? We're not finished with your education yet. Then I saw him lift his foot, the heavy work boot he always wore, steel-toed and designed for construction work. I saw him aim it at my ankle, saw the calculation in his eyes as he chose exactly where to strike. Derek, no! The boot came down with all his weight behind it, connecting with my left ankle with a sound I'll never forget. The crack of bone breaking, the immediate explosion of pain that shot up my leg and through my entire body. I screamed, not just from pain, but from the shock of realizing that my stepbrother had just deliberately broken my foot. Derek, said, breathing heavily as he looked down at me, writhing on the concrete floor. Now you know what it feels like to have something important destroyed. I couldn't speak through the pain, couldn't do anything but sob and clutch my ankle, which was already swelling and turning purple. Tarek, I gasped. Why? Because someone needed to knock you down a peg. Because someone needed to show you that you're not as special as you think you are. You broke my foot, I whispered, still unable to believe what had just happened. I taught you a lesson. There's a difference. Derek, I need to go to the hospital. You need to think about what you did to deserve this. I didn't do anything to deserve this. You did everything to deserve this, Natasha. Years of making me feel worthless. Years of stealing attention that should have been mine. Years of acting like you're better than everyone else. I tried to stand up, but the pain in my ankle was excruciating. I collapsed back onto the concrete, crying harder than I'd ever cried in my life. Mom, I called weakly. Mom, help me. Mom's at the grocery store with Dad. They won't be back for an hour. Derek, please call 911. Why would I do that? Because you broke my foot. Because I need medical attention. Because you need to learn that actions have consequences. What actions? What did I do wrong? You know what you did. But I didn't know. I genuinely had no idea what I'd done to deserve having my ankle deliberately broken by someone who was supposed to be my family. When Mom and William finally came home and found me crying on the garage floor, Derek had already rehearsed his story. I was trying to reach something on a high shelf, he said. I'd fallen off a stepladder. I'd tried to catch me, but couldn't reach me in time. It was an accident, he said, with perfectly feigned concern. I feel terrible about it. And my mother, looking between her injured daughter and her stepson's performance of remorse, made the choice that would define our family forever. "Accidents happen," she said. "Natasha, you need to forgive your brother and move on." But as I lay there with my broken ankle throbbing and Derek's satisfied smirk burned into my memory, I knew this was no accident. And I was about to discover that some medical professionals are trained to recognize the difference between accidental injuries and deliberate violence. The X-rays don't lie, and neither do doctors who know what intentional trauma looks like. Derek thought he'd taught me a lesson about powerlessness. He was about to learn a lesson about consequences. The emergency room visit that night was a masterclass in family gaslighting. As I sat in the wheelchair with my ankle throbbing and swollen to twice its normal size, Mom and William flanked Derek like protective bodyguards while he performed the role of concerned stepbrother for the medical staff. "She was trying to get a box down from the top shelf in the garage," Derek explained to the triage nurse, his voice perfectly calibrated with just the right amount of worry and guilt. "That's quite a lot of swelling for a fall. How did you land?" "Awkwardly," Mom answered before I could speak. "You know how teenagers are, always rushing around, not being careful." I stared at my mother in disbelief. Even now, even with me sitting in front of her with a clearly broken ankle, she was finding ways to make this my fault. "Natasha," Patricia addressed me directly. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" I opened my mouth to speak, but William jumped in. "She's been pretty shaken up since the accident. Derek feels terrible about not being able to prevent it." Derek nodded sadly. "I keep replaying it in my head, wishing I'd been standing closer to the ladder." The performance was flawless. To anyone watching, Derek looked like a caring older brother devastated by his inability to prevent a tragic accident. But I caught something the adults missed. When Derek thought no one was looking, he glanced at me with that same satisfied smirk I'd seen in the garage. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching me sit there in pain while he got sympathy for being a good brother in a terrible situation.
"The X-ray technician will be with you shortly," Patricia said. "Try to keep weight off that ankle until we know what we're dealing with." As we waited, I listened to my family construct the narrative that would become the official version of events. "Teenagers and ladders," William said, shaking his head. "I should have been there to help her reach whatever she needed." "It's not your fault, honey," Mom replied. "Natasha's always been independent. Sometimes too independent for her own good." "I just wish I'd caught her," Derek added. "I feel like I let everyone down." Mom actually put her arm around Derek. "Sweetheart, you did everything you could. Accidents happen, and we're all just grateful it wasn't worse." I listened to this conversation with growing rage and disbelief. They were crafting a story where Derek was the hero who'd tried to save me, where my own independence was to blame for the injury, where everyone was a victim of unfortunate circumstances. Everyone except me, the person with the actual broken ankle. When the X-ray results came back, the orthopedic surgeon on call, Dr. James Harrison, studied them with a concerned expression. "This is a complicated fracture," he pointed to the images on the light box. "The ankle is broken in 2 places, and there's significant damage to the surrounding ligaments." "Will she need surgery?" Mom asked. "Possibly, but I'm more concerned about the mechanism of injury here." "What do you mean?" William asked. Dr. Harrison looked at Derek. "You said she fell off a stepladder?" "That's right." "And you said you tried to catch her?" "I tried, but I wasn't close enough." Dr. Harrison nodded slowly, then turned to me. "Natasha, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened. Start with why you were on the ladder." This time, I was determined to speak before anyone could interrupt me. I was getting my college application materials organized when Derek came out to the garage. We got into an argument, and she was reaching for a heavy box on the top shelf. I told her to wait for help, but you know how stubborn she can be. Dr. Harrison held up a hand.
Let me hear from Natasha, please. But before I could continue, Mom leaned forward. Doctor, she's been pretty traumatized by the fall. Sometimes when people are in shock, they misremember details. Mom, I'm not misremembering anything. Sweetheart, Mom said in that patronizing tone I'd heard countless times before. You hit your head when you fell. You've been confused since we found you. I didn't hit my head. The important thing, Williams said firmly, is getting her ankle treated. The details of how it happened aren't really relevant to her medical care, are they? Dr. Harrison looked between my family members and me, and I could see him processing the dynamic. A teenage girl trying to tell her story, and 3 adults working together to prevent her from speaking. Actually, Dr. Harrison said slowly, the mechanism of injury is very relevant to treatment decisions. Different types of trauma require different approaches. He turned back to me. Natasha, take your time and tell me what you remember. Derek and I were arguing about my college applications. He was angry about my grades and my plans for the future. He threw my papers on the floor, and when I tried to pick them up, he blocked me from leaving the garage. Natasha, Mom's voice carried a warning tone. You're confused, sweetheart. I'm not confused. Derek grabbed my arm when I tried to get past him, and when I fell down, he stepped on my ankle with his work boot. The silence that followed was deafening. That's not what happened, Derek said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Natasha, Williams said, you're obviously upset and in pain. Sometimes trauma can make us imagine things that didn't really happen. I didn't imagine anything. Derek deliberately stepped on my ankle to hurt me. Doctor, Mom said quickly, as I mentioned, she hit her head during the fall. She's been disoriented since the accident. Dr. Harrison looked at my head. I don't see any signs of head trauma. No cuts, no bruising, no swelling. It was a minor bump, but enough to shake her up. Natasha, Dr. Harrison said, do you remember hitting your head? No, because I didn't hit my head. I fell on my hands and knees, and then Derek stepped on my ankle. She's obviously confused, Williams said. Derek would never hurt her intentionally. They're brother and sister. Stepbrother, I corrected, and he just told me an hour ago that he wanted to teach me a lesson by hurting me. Natasha, Mom's voice was sharp now. That's enough. You're embarrassing yourself and you're hurting Derek's feelings. Dr. Harrison stood up. I'd like to examine the ankle more closely. Everyone except Natasha needs to wait outside. We'd prefer to stay. She's a minor and we're her parents. And I'm her doctor. Please step outside. After my family reluctantly left the room, Dr. Harrison sat down next to my bed. Natasha, I need you to tell me honestly, do you feel safe at home? The question hit me like a physical blow. In all the chaos of the injury and the hospital visit, I hadn't really processed the larger implications of what had happened. I don't know, I said quietly. Has Derek hurt you before? Not physically, but he's been getting more aggressive lately, more angry about my achievements, more resentful about the attention I get for doing well in school. What kind of aggressive behavior? Verbal threats, mostly. He's told me that I think I'm better than everyone else, that I deserve to be knocked down a peg. Tonight was the first time he actually followed through on his threats. Dr. Harrison made notes. Natasha, I need to tell you something. The fracture pattern on your X-ray isn't consistent with a fall from a stepladder. What do you mean? Falls typically result from specific types of fractures, usually from impact with the ground. What I'm seeing here looks more like a crush injury. My stomach dropped. A crush injury? The kind that happens when significant weight is applied directly to the ankle, like someone stepping on it with force. So you believe me? I believe the medical evidence, and the medical evidence supports your account of what happened.
Dr. Harrison closed his chart and looked at me seriously. Natasha, I'm required by law to report suspected cases of domestic violence to the authorities. Based on your injuries and your account of how they occurred, I'm going to have to make that report. What does that mean? It means Child Protective Services will open an investigation. It means the police will interview everyone involved. It means this situation is about to become very serious for your family. I thought about Derek's threat that no one in the family wanted to deal with the reality of who he was. I thought about Mom's immediate move to protect him and blame me. I thought about 4 years of watching my family make excuses for Derek's behavior while holding me to impossible standards. Dr. Harrison, what if my family doesn't believe me? What if they stick to the stepladder story? Then investigators will look at all the evidence, medical, physical, and testimonial, and make their own determination about what happened. A nurse knocked on the door. Dr. Harrison, the family is asking when they can come back in. In a moment, he replied. Then he turned back to me. Natasha, before I let them back in, I need you to know something. What happened to you tonight wasn't your fault. It wasn't caused by your grades, your college plans, or anything else about your behavior. It happened because someone chose to hurt you. But what if Derek's right? What if I do act like I'm better than everyone else? Even if that were true, which I doubt, it wouldn't justify someone breaking your ankle. Nothing you could say or do would justify that level of violence. When my family came back into the room, the atmosphere had changed completely. Dr. Harrison's demeanor was professional but cold, and I could see my parents picking up on the shift. What's the treatment plan? Mom asked. Natasha will need surgery to repair the fractures. We'll schedule that for tomorrow morning. Surgery? William looked concerned. Is that really necessary? Given the extent of the damage, yes, the ankle was severely traumatized. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Traumatized? The medical term for this type of injury is traumatic fracture. It occurs when significant force is applied to bone and surrounding tissue. From the fall, Mom said quickly. From whatever caused the injury, Dr. Harrison replied neutrally. Doctor, when will Natasha be able to go home? That depends on several factors. We'll need to monitor her recovery, ensure there are no complications, and coordinate with other agencies that may need to be involved. Other agencies? Mom's voice was sharp. Standard protocol for this type of injury in a minor. The next morning, I woke up to find a woman in a business suit sitting next to my hospital bed. She introduced herself as Linda Martinez from the Department of Children and Families. Natasha, I understand you were injured at home yesterday. I'd like to hear your version of what happened. Before I could answer, Mom and William burst into the room. Excuse me, who are you and what are you doing with our daughter? I'm Linda Martinez from DCF. I'm here to investigate a report of suspected child abuse. Child abuse? Mom's voice went up an octave. This was an accident. Our son Derek tried to help her when she fell off a ladder. That's one version of events, Linda said calmly. I'm here to gather all the relevant information. We want a lawyer, William declared. That's your right, but I'm still going to need to interview Natasha separately. She's a minor. We have a right to be present. Actually, in cases of suspected abuse, children have a right to be interviewed without their guardians present, especially when those guardians might be involved in the alleged abuse. We're not involved in anything, Mom protested. Derek didn't abuse anyone. Then you have nothing to worry about, Linda replied. After my parents reluctantly left, Linda turned to me with a gentle expression. Natasha, I've read Dr. Harrison's report. He believes your injury was caused intentionally. Can you tell me what really happened? So I told her everything. Derek's years of resentment, his escalating anger about my academic success, the threats he'd made about teaching me a lesson, and finally, the deliberate attack in the garage. Has Derek hurt you before? Not physically, but he's been increasingly hostile. He blames me for making him look bad by comparison. What about your parents? How do they typically handle conflicts between you and Derek? I thought about years of being told to be the bigger person, of being expected to apologize for Derek's behavior, of watching my achievements minimized while his failures were excused.
They always take his side, I said quietly. Even when he's clearly wrong, they find ways to make it my fault or just dismiss it as a misunderstanding. Even now, even with your broken ankle, even now, they're already calling it an accident and expecting me to forgive him and move on. Linda made extensive notes. Natasha, I need you to understand that what happened to you is a crime. It's assault. And because it happened within your family, it's also domestic violence. What happens now? Now we investigate. We interview everyone involved, we review the medical evidence, and we determine whether it's safe for you to return home. What if it's not safe? Then we find somewhere that is safe. That afternoon, I learned that Linda had interviewed Derek separately. According to the nurses, he'd maintained his story about the stepladder accident, but had become increasingly agitated when pressed for details. She'd also interviewed Mom and William, who had stuck to their version of events, but had been unable to explain the inconsistencies between their story and the medical evidence. But the most revealing interview, Linda told me later, had been with Derek's former girlfriend, Ashley Morrison. I contacted her because your parents mentioned that Derek had been stressed about a recent breakup. Ashley had some very interesting things to say about Derek's behavior. What kind of things?
She said Derek had a pattern of getting violent when he felt threatened or embarrassed. She said he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise when she'd mentioned that she was considering transferring to a better college. My blood ran cold. He hurt Ashley? She said he had anger management issues that got worse whenever anyone around him succeeded at something he couldn't do. She said he'd told her that you made him feel worthless by being so perfect all the time. So I wasn't imagining it. He really did resent my achievements. Natasha, Ashley also said something else. She said Derek had talked about wanting to put you in your place, but that he was waiting for the right opportunity. So this was premeditated? It appears so. That evening, as I lay in my hospital bed with my ankle in a cast and my future uncertain, I realized something important. For years, I'd been gaslighted into believing that Derek's problems were somehow my fault, that my success was selfish, that my family's dysfunction was just normal sibling rivalry. But medical evidence doesn't lie. X-rays don't show favoritism, and professionals trained to recognize abuse patterns can see through family narratives designed to protect abusers. Derek had thought he could break my ankle and hide behind the family's willingness to cover for him. He was about to learn that some truths are too obvious to deny, and some professionals are too experienced to fool. The stepbrother who'd tried to teach me a lesson about powerlessness was about to get a lesson in accountability. And this time, the adults in charge weren't going to be swayed by family loyalty or convenient lies. 3 days after my surgery, Linda Martinez returned to my hospital room with a thick file folder and news that would change everything. Natasha, I've completed the preliminary investigation and I need to share some findings with you. What I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear, but you have a right to know. I adjusted myself in the hospital bed, my ankle still throbbing despite the pain medication. What did you find? First, Dr. Harrison's medical report conclusively proves that your injury was caused by intentional trauma, not a fall. The fracture pattern, the tissue damage, and the location of the breaks are all consistent with a heavy object being applied with force directly to your ankle. So, the medical evidence supports my story? Completely. But there's more. Linda opened her folder. We ran a background check on Derek as part of our investigation, and we found some very concerning information. My stomach dropped. What kind of information? Derek has a juvenile record that was sealed when he turned 18. However, because this is a child welfare investigation, we were able to access those records. What's in his juvenile record? Linda pulled out a document. 3 incidents of assault during high school, 2 against classmates who he felt had shown him up academically or socially, and 1 against a teacher who gave him a failing grade. I stared at her in shock. Derek has a history of violence? Yes, and in each case the pattern was the same. He felt humiliated or threatened by someone's success, he planned a retaliatory attack, and then he claimed the resulting violence was either accidental or justified.
How did I not know about any of this? The records were sealed, and it appears your parents never told you, which raises questions about whether they were aware of Derek's history when they moved you into the same household. Linda pulled out another document. There's something else. We interviewed Derek's high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patricia Whitman, who's now retired. She remembers Derek very clearly. What did she say? She said Derek had a pattern of targeting high-achieving students. He would befriend them initially, then become increasingly hostile as their success became apparent. She said she'd recommended therapy for anger management, but Derek's father, your stepfather William, refused to pursue it. I felt like the room was spinning. William knew Derek had problems and didn't get him help? According to Mrs. Whitman, William's position was that Derek was just competitive and would outgrow his aggressive tendencies. So William has been enabling Derek's violence for years. It appears so. And Natasha, there's something else you need to know. We're not the only agency investigating this case anymore. What do you mean? Well, the district attorney's office has opened a criminal investigation. Derek is going to be charged with aggravated assault, and possibly with additional charges related to his pattern of violence.
I felt a surge of relief mixed with terror. What does that mean for me? It means you're going to be the key witness in a criminal trial. It means Derek's defense team is going to try to discredit your testimony and claim this was an accident. And it means your family is going to face some very difficult choices about who they support. That afternoon, my mother came to visit me alone for the first time since the attack. She looked exhausted and stressed, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Natasha, we need to talk about this investigation. What about it? The social worker told us that Derek might be charged with a crime. She said you're claiming he hurt you on purpose. I'm not claiming anything, Mom. I'm telling the truth about what happened. Sweetheart, I know you're angry about your ankle, but accusing Derek of assault? That's a very serious thing. Assault is a very serious thing. Mom sat down heavily in the chair next to my bed. Natasha, you have to understand what this is doing to our family. William is beside himself with worry. Derek is talking about having to get a lawyer. The neighbors are starting to ask questions. Maybe they should ask questions. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe if more people had been asking questions about Derek's behavior over the years, this wouldn't have happened. Derek doesn't have behavior problems. He's just been going through a difficult period. Mom, Derek has a juvenile record for assault. He's been fired from multiple jobs for aggressive behavior. He has a documented pattern of violence going back years. Mom's face went pale. How do you know about his juvenile record? The DCF investigator told me. Mom, did you and William know about Derek's history when you moved me into the house with him? That's not relevant to the current situation. It's completely relevant. You put me in a house with someone who had a history of violence, and you never told me. Those were isolated incidents when Derek was younger. He was just acting out because of his parents' divorce. 3 assaults in high school aren't isolated incidents, Mom. They're a pattern. Natasha, you're taking this too far. The social worker is filling your head with ideas about Derek being dangerous, but she doesn't know him like we do. How well do we really know him? Did you know he'd been fired from his job 6 weeks ago? Mom was quiet for a moment. William mentioned Derek was between jobs. Did you know he was fired for threatening a coworker? William said there was a disagreement with management. Mom, do you see how you and William constantly make excuses for Derek's behavior? We don't make excuses. We provide context. What context justifies breaking my ankle? Derek didn't break your ankle on purpose. It was an accident. The medical evidence says otherwise. Medical evidence can be misinterpreted by a board-certified orthopedic surgeon who specializes in trauma injuries. Mom stood up and started pacing. Natasha,
I need you to really think about what you're doing here. If you pursue these charges against Derek, you're going to destroy his future. He'll have a criminal record, he'll never be able to get a decent job or go to college. Mom, Derek destroyed his own future when he chose to assault me. It was an accident. Stop saying that. You weren't there. You didn't see the look in his eyes when he raised his foot to stop on my ankle. You didn't hear him tell me he was going to teach me a lesson. Even if Derek did lose his temper, that doesn't mean he intended to seriously hurt me. He broke my ankle in 2 places, Mom. I needed surgery. How is that not seriously hurting me? Mom sat back down, and I could see tears in her eyes. Natasha, I'm begging you to reconsider this. Think about what's best for the family. What about what's best for me? What's best for you is having a stable family environment to come home to. A stable family environment that includes someone who assaulted me? A stable family environment where we work through our problems together instead of involving outside agencies. Mom, Derek didn't work through his problems. He worked through his anger by breaking my ankle. That's not fair. What's not fair is expecting me to pretend this was an accident to protect someone who deliberately hurt me. Mom was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between desperation and resentment. Natasha, if you go through with this criminal case, I don't know if I can support you. What does that mean? It means that if you force me to choose between supporting you and supporting my husband and stepson, I might not choose you. The words hit me like a physical blow. You're threatening to disown me if I don't drop the charges? I'm telling you the reality of the situation. William has made it clear that if Derek goes to prison, he's going to blame me for not protecting his son. Our marriage might not survive this. So, you're choosing your marriage over your daughter's safety? I'm trying to hold our family together. By sacrificing the family member who was victimized? By finding a solution that works for everyone. There is no solution that works for everyone, Mom. Derek committed a crime. He's going to face consequences for that crime. The only question is whether you're going to support your injured daughter or the person who injured her. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. After Mom left, I called Linda Martinez and told her about the conversation. I'm not surprised. This is a common pattern in domestic violence cases. Family members often pressure victims to drop charges or minimize the abuse to preserve family unity. What should I do? You should continue to tell the truth and let the legal system work. Natasha, your mother's reaction doesn't change the facts of what happened to you. But what if she really does choose Derek and William over me? Then you'll have learned something important about your family's priorities, and you'll still have done the right thing by holding Derek accountable for his actions.
That evening, I received an unexpected visitor, Ashley Morrison, Derek's ex-girlfriend. Natasha, I heard about what happened. I wanted to come see you. Ashley, thank you for talking to the investigator about Derek's behavior. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have warned you. Warned me about what? Ashley sat down in the chair next to my bed. Derek has been obsessed with you for years. He's constantly talking about how you make him look bad, how unfair it is that you get praise for achievements while he gets criticized for failures. I never meant to make him feel bad. That's not the point. Derek can't handle anyone succeeding if he's not succeeding. It threatens his entire sense of self. The investigator said he had a pattern of targeting high-achieving people. It's worse than that, Natasha. Derek doesn't just target successful people, he studies them. He learns their routines, their vulnerabilities, their pressure points. Then he strikes when they're most vulnerable. My blood ran cold. He studied me?
He knew your college application deadlines. He knew when you'd be most stressed about your future. He knew that attacking you right after you got into Princeton would cause maximum psychological damage. So this really was premeditated. Completely. Derek had been planning something like this for months. He just needed the right trigger and the right opportunity. Ashley, why didn't you warn me sooner? Because I hoped he would just move on after we broke up. I hoped removing himself from my life would satisfy his need for control. But it didn't. No. If anything, losing me made him more desperate to assert power over someone else. You were the obvious target because you represent everything he resents about his own failures. Ashley reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Natasha, there's something else. I recorded some conversations I had with Derek about you. What kind of conversations? Conversations where Derek talked about wanting to hurt you. I recorded them because his threats were escalating and I was scared he might actually follow through. She played an audio file on her phone. Derek's voice was clear and unmistakable. Natasha thinks she's so fucking special with her perfect grades and her college acceptances. Someone needs to knock her down a few pegs. Someone needs to show her that all her achievements don't protect her from the real world. Ashley fast-forwarded to another section. I keep thinking about ways to hurt her that would really matter. Not just embarrass her, but actually damage her future prospects. Something that would make her understand what it's like to have your dreams destroyed. My hands were shaking as I listened to Derek's voice, planning my assault weeks before it happened. Natasha, how long ago did he say this? About 2 months ago, right around the time he started getting more aggressive about your college applications. Have you given this recording to the investigators? I gave it to them yesterday, along with text messages where Derek talked about teaching you a lesson and making you pay for making him look bad. Text messages? Ashley showed me her phone. Dozens of messages from Derek over the past few months, all focused on his resentment toward me and his desire to see me fail. Derek has been planning this for months, I said, staring at the evidence. At least. And Natasha, there's something else you should know. Derek didn't just target you randomly. He specifically chose to attack your ankle because he researched what kind of injury would be most likely to interfere with your sports activities and college plans. He researched it? He looked up information about sports medicine and career-ending injuries. He wanted to hurt you in a way that would have long-term consequences for your future. The calculated cruelty of Derek's plan was breathtaking. This wasn't a momentary loss of control or a family dispute that got out of hand. This was a systematically planned attack designed to cause maximum damage to my life prospects. Ashley, will you testify about all of this if there's a trial? Absolutely. Derek needs to face consequences for what he's done, and your family needs to understand that this wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. My family is pressuring me to drop the charges. Of course they are. That's what enablers do. They protect abusers by silencing victims. What should I do? You should trust the evidence. You should trust the professionals who are investigating this case, and you should trust yourself to know the difference between an accident and an assault. After Ashley left, I sat in my hospital bed, looking at the cast on my ankle and thinking about everything I'd learned. Derek hadn't just broken my foot in a moment of anger. He'd planned and researched the attack for months. He'd specifically chosen an injury that would damage my future prospects. And he'd done it all while my family made excuses for his behavior and enabled his violence. But now I had something Derek hadn't counted on. Professional investigators who recognized the signs of domestic violence, medical evidence that proved his intent, and documentation of his pattern of planning and executing attacks against successful people. The stepbrother who thought he could break my ankle and hide behind family loyalty was about to discover that some evidence is too overwhelming to ignore, and some crimes are too serious to excuse. Derek had planned his attack carefully, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He underestimated how many people were trained to see through the lies that families tell to protect their abusers. And now those people were building a case that would expose not just Derek's violence, but the entire family system that had enabled it for years. The arrest happened 2 weeks after I was discharged from the hospital. I was at my friend Maya's house, which I had been staying since DCF determined it was not safe for me to return home, when Linda Martinez called with the news. Natasha, Derek was arrested this morning at 6 a.m. He's being charged with aggravated assault in the first degree, criminal threatening, and witness intimidation.
I sat down heavily on Maya's couch, my ankle still in a walking boot. Even though I'd been expecting this, hearing it actually happen felt surreal. What happens now? He'll be arraigned this afternoon. The prosecutor expects to request a substantial bail amount given Derek's history of violence and the premeditated nature of the attack. Will my family be there? Probably. And Natasha, you should be prepared for them to try to contact you. The prosecutor has advised them not to communicate with you directly, but that doesn't mean they won't try. She was right. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls and text messages from Mom, William, and various relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I let them all go to voicemail, but the messages painted a clearer picture of the family's response. Mom's voice was shaky and desperate. "Natasha, they arrested Derek this morning. He's sitting in jail because of this misunderstanding. Please call me back. We need to talk about dropping these charges." William's message was more aggressive. "Natasha, your accusations have destroyed this family. Derek is a good kid who made one mistake, and you're ruining his entire future. This has gone too far." But the most revealing message came from Derek's Aunt Patricia, William's sister, who I'd barely spoken to over the years. "Natasha, I don't know what kind of lies you've been telling, but Derek would never hurt anyone on purpose. You're tearing this family apart with your vindictive behavior." The coordinated nature of their response was telling. They weren't questioning whether Derek had hurt me, they were questioning whether he deserved consequences for it. That afternoon, Maya drove me to the courthouse for Derek's arraignment. Linda Martinez had warned me that I didn't need to be there, but I wanted to see Derek face actual consequences for the first time in his life. The courtroom was small and crowded. Derek sat at the defendant's table with his court-appointed attorney, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. Gone was the confident aggression he'd displayed in our garage. In its place was a young man who looked scared and confused by the reality of criminal proceedings. My family occupied the front row of the gallery, dressed in their best clothes and wearing expressions of grim determination. Mom kept glancing back at the entrance, probably hoping I would show up so she could make one more appeal for family unity. When Derek turned around and saw me sitting in the back row with Maya and Linda, his expression shifted to something I recognized, that flash of rage when he felt his control slipping away. The prosecutor, District Attorney Sarah Chen, stood up to address the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with aggravated assault in the first degree, a Class B felony in connection with a deliberate attack on his 16-year-old stepsister that resulted in multiple fractures requiring surgical intervention." Derek's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender named Robert Walsh, immediately objected. "Your Honor, this was a family accident that's been blown out of proportion by overzealous investigators." "Mr. Walsh," Judge Martinez replied, "this is an arraignment, not a trial. Save your arguments for the appropriate time." DHN continued. "Your Honor, the state requests that bail be set at $50,000. The defendant has a documented history of violence dating back to his juvenile years, has been escalating his aggressive behavior in recent months, and poses a significant threat to the victim, who is a minor living in the same household." "The same household that he's no longer residing in," the judge noted, looking at the case file. "That's correct, Your Honor. The victim has been placed in protective custody due to safety concerns." I watched William's face go pale at the mention of protective custody. This was probably the first time it had occurred to him that my removal from the home was permanent, not temporary. Derek's lawyer stood up.
Your Honor, my client has no adult criminal record and strong family ties to the community. We request he be released on his own recognizance. Mr. Walsh, your client has a sealed juvenile record showing 3 prior assault charges. That suggests a pattern of violence, not an isolated incident. Those were minor altercations during his teenage years, Your Honor. Judge Martinez looked directly at Derek. Mr. Thornfield, do you understand the charges against you? Derek stood up slowly. Yes, Your Honor, but I want to say that this whole thing is a misunderstanding. My stepsister fell off a ladder and somehow that's being twisted into... Mr. Thornfield, this is not the time for you to testify about the facts of the case. Do you understand the charges? Yes or no? Yes, Your Honor. How do you plead? Derek's lawyer whispered something in his ear, then Derek replied, Not guilty, Your Honor. Bail is set at $50,000 cash or surety. Mr. Thornfield, you are ordered to have no contact with the alleged victim, either directly or through third parties. Violation of this order will result in immediate revocation of bail. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. As the courtroom cleared, I watched my family huddle around Derek's lawyer, apparently discussing bail options. William was gesturing animatedly, probably trying to figure out how to come up with $50,000. Natasha, Linda said quietly, are you okay? I'm fine. It's just strange seeing Derek in that position. He looks so ordinary. That's how abusers often look in courtroom settings. The environment strips away their power and control. Do you think they'll be able to post bail? Probably, but even if they do, Derek will be under court supervision and prohibited from contacting you. As we walked toward the exit, I heard someone calling my name. I turned to see Mom hurrying after me, with William close behind. Natasha, wait! Linda stepped between us. Mrs. Williams, you've been advised not to have contact with the victim. I'm her mother. I have a right to speak to my own daughter. Not when that contact might interfere with an ongoing criminal case. This is ridiculous, William said, his face red with anger. We're family. We should be working this out amongst ourselves, not dragging it through the courts.
Mr. Williams, Linda replied calmly, your stepson broke your stepdaughter's ankle in 2 places. This stopped being a family matter when it became a felony assault. It was an accident. The medical evidence disagrees with that assessment. Mom looked directly at me, tears streaming down her face. Natasha, please. Derek made bail, but the lawyer says if this goes to trial, he could go to prison for years. Is that really what you want? Before I could answer, Linda intervened again. Mrs. Williams, you need to stop. You're violating the no-contact order by trying to pressure the victim to drop charges. I'm not pressuring anyone. I'm begging my daughter to show mercy to her brother. Derek isn't my brother, I said quietly. Brothers don't deliberately break their siblings' ankles. Natasha, Williams stepped forward, you have to understand what this is doing to Derek. He's been crying every night since his arrest. He's terrified of going to prison. He should have thought about that before he assaulted me. It was an accident! William, stop lying. We all know it wasn't an accident. Derek has a history of violence. He planned this attack for months, and he specifically chose to injure me in a way that would affect my future prospects. William's face went white. How do you know about his history? Because unlike our family, the investigators actually looked into Derek's background instead of just making excuses for him. Those juvenile charges were expunged, Mom said desperately. They're not supposed to count against him now. They count when they establish a pattern of behavior, Linda explained, and they're especially relevant when the current charges fit that same pattern. What pattern? William demanded. Targeting successful people who make Derek feel inadequate, planning attacks when victims are vulnerable, and then claiming the resulting violence was accidental. I watched my stepfather process this information, saw the moment when he realized that Derek's behavior wasn't just teenage acting out or unfortunate accidents. For the first time, William seemed to understand that his son had serious problems that went beyond what the family had been willing to acknowledge. Even if that's true, Mom said, Derek is still just a 19-year-old kid who made a mistake. Sending him to prison won't undo what happened to Natasha. but it might prevent him from hurting other people. Other people? Natasha, Derek would never hurt anyone else. Mom, Derek has been fired from multiple jobs for threatening coworkers. He has a documented pattern of increasing violence. I'm not his first victim. I'm just his first victim with enough evidence to make charges stick. The conversation was interrupted by Derek's lawyer approaching our group. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, we need to discuss payment arrangements for the bail bond. William turned to the lawyer. How much time do we have to come up with the money? Derek will remain in custody until the full amount is posted. And if we can't raise it, then he stays in jail until trial. I watched this exchange with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Derek was finally facing real consequences for his actions, but it was also destroying the family structure I'd grown up in. Natasha, Derek's lawyer, said, turning to me, I'm Robert Walsh, your stepbrother's attorney. I wonder if we could arrange a time to talk. Mr. Walsh, Linda interjected, you know better than to approach a victim directly, especially a minor. I'm simply trying to understand her perspective on what happened. My perspective is that Derek deliberately broke my ankle and then lied about it. The medical evidence supports that perspective. Medical evidence can be interpreted different ways. Not when it's this clear. Dr. Harrison's report conclusively shows that my injury was caused by a crush force applied directly to the ankle, not by a fall. Dr. Harrison might be mistaken about the mechanism of injury. Are you planning to argue that a board-certified orthopedic surgeon doesn't know the difference between a fall injury and a crush injury? Walsh looked uncomfortable. We're still reviewing our options for the defense. Mr. Walsh, D.A. Chen, appeared behind us. I need to remind you that your client is under a no-contact order. That includes contact through his attorney. I was simply trying to gather information for the defense. You can gather information through proper discovery channels. This conversation ends now. As we walked away from the courthouse, Linda filled me in on what would happen next. The trial is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. The prosecutor will need you to testify about what happened, what Derek said to you, and how the attack has affected your life. What about Ashley's recordings? Those will be admitted as evidence, along with Derek's employment records, his juvenile history, and the medical reports. Do you think he'll be convicted? Based on the evidence, I think it's very likely. Derek's defense team will try to argue that this was a family dispute that got out of hand, but the premeditation evidence make that argument very difficult. What about my family? Will they be allowed to testify for Derek? They can testify as character witnesses, but their testimony about the incident itself isn't very valuable since none of them actually witnessed the attack. And if Derek is convicted, he's facing 2 to 10 years in prison for aggravated assault, plus additional time for the other charges. 2 weeks later, I was back in court for a pre-trial hearing when something unexpected happened. Derek's lawyer requested a meeting with the prosecutor to discuss a plea agreement. What does that mean? I asked D.A. Chen during a recess. It means Derek's legal team realizes they're unlikely to win at trial, so they want to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for a guilty plea. What kind of reduced sentence? That's what we'll discuss. But Natasha, I want your input on any plea agreement. As the victim, you have a right to be heard before we accept any deal. The plea negotiations took place over several days, with both legal teams exchanging offers and counteroffers. Finally, D.A. Chen called me with the final proposal.
Derek is willing to plead guilty to assault in the second degree and criminal threatening. In exchange, the state would recommend a sentence of 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. What does that mean for me? It means Derek would serve actual jail time, have a permanent criminal record, and be under court supervision for years after his release. It also means you wouldn't have to testify at a trial. What about restitution? Derek would be required to pay for all your medical expenses, physical therapy costs, and any ongoing treatment related to the injury. I thought about it for several days before giving D.A. Chen my answer. I want him to take the plea deal. Are you sure? We have a very strong case for trial. I'm sure. Derek needs to face consequences, but I also need to move on with my life. 18 months in prison and 3 years of probation will give him time to get help for his anger issues while keeping him away from potential future victims. The plea hearing took place on a cold Thursday morning in December.
Derek stood before Judge Martinez, flanked by his lawyer and his parents, and formally admitted his guilt. Mr. Thornfield, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting that you intentionally caused physical injury to your stepsister? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Yes, Your Honor. And do you understand that this plea will result in a permanent criminal record? Yes, Your Honor. How do you plead to the charge of assault in the second degree? Guilty, Your Honor. How do you plead to the charge of criminal threatening? Guilty, Your Honor. Judge Martinez reviewed the plea agreement and the sentencing recommendation. Mr. Thornfield, the court accepts your guilty plea and sentences you to 18 months in the state correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to the victim and to have no contact with her for the duration of your sentence and probation period. I watched Derek being led away in handcuffs, flanked by 2 bailiffs. For the first time since the attack, he looked genuinely remorseful rather than just sorry he'd been caught. Mom and William sat in the front row, both crying quietly. After Derek disappeared through the door leading to the holding cells, they turned to look at me. For a moment, I thought Mom might try to approach me again, but Linda's presence seemed to remind her of the no-contact order. Instead, she just sat there with tears streaming down her face, looking at the daughter she'd chosen not to support. Outside the courthouse, Linda and I sat on a bench overlooking the harbor. "How do you feel?" she asked. Relieved? Sad? Angry? Grateful, all at the same time. That's normal. Justice doesn't erase trauma, but it can help with the healing process. What happens to me now? That depends on what you want. You're welcome to stay with Maya's family until you turn 18, or we can explore other placement options. What about college? I'm supposed to start at Princeton in the fall. Your college plans haven't changed. In fact, Princeton's financial aid office has been very supportive. They've increased your aid package to account for your changed family circumstances. I looked out at the water, thinking about everything that had changed in the past few months. I'd lost my family, but I'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that I deserved to be safe, that violence was never acceptable, and that some people in positions of authority would actually listen to victims and take action to protect them. Linda, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Derek will actually change? Do you think prison will help him? I don't know. Some people use consequences as motivation to address their problems. Others just become better at hiding their behavior. What do you think will happen to my family? I think your mother and stepfather are going to have to confront some difficult truths about Derek's behavior and their role in enabling it. That might lead to positive changes, or it might lead to them doubling down on denial. And what about me? How do I move forward from this? You move forward by remembering that none of this was your fault. You move forward by building relationships with people who value your safety and well-being. You move forward by using your intelligence and determination to create the future you want. Even with a broken ankle? Especially with a broken ankle. Because now you know that you can survive being hurt by people who are supposed to love you, and you can still demand justice even when your own family pressures you to stay silent. 6 months later, I graduated from high school as valedictorian, delivered my speech on crutches because my ankle was still not fully healed, and received a standing ovation from classmates who knew what I'd been going through. Mom and William didn't attend my graduation. They were visiting Derek in prison. But Maya's family was there, along with Linda Martinez, Dr. Harrison, and DA Sarah Chen. Ashley Morrison drove down from college to watch me receive my diploma. These people, professionals who had believed me, friends who had supported me, and advocates who had fought for me, had become my real family.
As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about Derek sitting in a prison cell, hopefully getting the therapy and anger management treatment that our family had refused to provide him for years. I thought about Mom and William, finally forced to confront the reality of Derek's violence, but still choosing to support the perpetrator over the victim. And I thought about myself, the girl who had been told to forgive and forget, who had instead chosen to seek justice and accountability. The stepbrother who had tried to break my future ended up breaking his own. The family who demanded my silence ended up silencing themselves through their choices. And the systems that were supposed to protect children, doctors, social workers, prosecutors, actually did their jobs when it mattered most. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when that someone is family.
Sometimes justice is more important than peace. And sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you will fail. But there are other people, professionals, advocates, friends, who will step up and do what your family should have done all along. Derek served 16 months of his 18-month sentence and was released on good behavior. He moved to another state as a condition of his probation, and I never saw him again. I graduated from Princeton with honors, went to graduate school for social work, and now help other young people navigate the system when their families fail to protect them. My ankle healed, though it still aches when it rains. My trust in family took longer to heal, but I learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about people who choose to support and protect each other. And every time I help a young person find the courage to report abuse, I remember that 16-year-old girl in the hospital bed who had to choose between family loyalty and personal safety. She chose safety. And that choice changed everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.